we need to continue to have a conversation about that whole idea around grief and understanding grief. And so, as you can see, if you were paying attention to the announcements, May is a busy month for me. And so I was attempting to do a mental wealth webinar this month around May being Mental Health Awareness Month, but I will not have the time to do it. So I just said we're going to incorporate LYFE Class and mental wealth webinar segment collectively. Let's just do it together. It's something that we teach normally in our experiences anyway. It's no separation. We just like to allow it for the larger audience, but we will direct all of the audiences, whether it's just for that or this, over this one way and speak to this particular arena. So I'm glad to have you here. Listen, just want to highlight a particular announcement that was here for this week. Let's see. Yeah. Where is this slide? Here it is. I did that wrong. Let's see. I'm moving. This weekend, we have an event coming up. Of course, the launch is coming. Stay tuned with that. June 12th, if you haven't made plans to be here, we want you to be here. If you've made plans, excellent. And make sure that I know about it so that we can engage you the way that we would love to. We would love to host you, okay? 50% off all month. Make sure that you get in on the special, because when it's gone, it's gone. This is a great opportunity for individuals who have desired to try coaching and counseling at any level to at least get engaged in the process of giving it a try so that you can see if the services work for you or not. You can do that here. Go to my website specifically. This is the announcement that I wanted to make mention of. This weekend down here in Florida City, Let's Heal One-on-One is doing their mental health seminar, and the host is Malika P. Crocker, the young lady that I just mentioned. It's going to be down here at FICA Williams 951 Southwest 4th Street in Homestead, Florida. Please, if you are local to the area and you have some time, this experience is going to happen between 2 and 6 p.m. And she has different hosts. Two of them you may recognize, or the third one as well, if you're local to the area. But of course, I'll be on panel with them. My husband's going to be on panel with us. And this young lady, Miss Darnisha, who I have been able to have the privilege of just hearing her voice and watching an interview with her, is going to be on panel as well. It's going to be an exciting time. The event is free. The goal is to get information out to the community. And so we want you to participate in that if you have the time. Now, there are other announcements that will be free flowing. We'll put them up at the end of the teaching so that you can review them, or you can go to the website, www.evolutionchurchsoflow.org, and review the website. All of these announcements that you're seeing here, you can see there. If you need any information regarding the mental health or mental wealth pieces, go to www.shazettaMorris.com and you can get some information there about some things that we're doing, what's coming up, and how you can get connected to the process of coaching and counseling. So we would love to facilitate some information to you and for you, just like we're going to do here tonight. So we want to get started with this because I know that this has been it's a hot topic. It's a sensitive topic, and as many individuals go live on social media, one of the reasons why I'm always hesitant about going live in those arenas is to make sure that individuals have the opportunity to ask the questions that they would not want to ask in front of the rest of the world. Now, some of this information, of course, we will have and I will share, but once we upload the video to our YouTube channel, they won't see the comments. Individuals won't have the ability to tap into that because we don't share the chat. We only share the video. And as you can see, the only person that is on video would be me. So I'm the only one that has exposure. So I definitely want you to feel comfortable with asking any questions as it relates to this teaching. If anything triggers you or challenges you, please do not hesitate to submit a note or a question in the Q&A section so that we can address whatever is going on with you. And the chat is here for those of you who want to just be able to be ministering angels to others who may be expressing how they're feeling in any form or fashion. This is a teaching that is from a spiritual leader and clinician's perspective. I am proudly a spiritual leader. I'm also proudly a professional therapist. I am a proud professional coach. I am an individual that works extensively with individuals from different backdrops and walks of life regarding some of the avenues that they walk through in their life's journey. And so grief is a huge part of what people experience. And, we've been walking quite recently here through our own expressions of grief in the loss of one of our great friends and brothers down in North Carolina. And so that brings about a whole bunch of different feelings as well. So we want to share those pieces with you. Mother's Day would have brought about a whole bunch of feelings of grief and loss. This pandemic has created a windstorm of all types of losses. And you'll see as we walk through some of the materials here that loss can be defined from many different levels, and it concerns many different things. It doesn't just have to be the loss of a person. It can be a loss of a job. It can be a loss of a home. It can be a loss of a marriage. It can be a loss of anything that is of substance and significance to you. And sometimes it's not normalized enough, the reality of people experiencing grief, how they experience it, what that's supposed to look like in any individual, how that's supposed to be shared or handled in a family or a community, varies with every person. There are particular dynamics as it relates to why someone can get cold and calloused regarding a loss and move on like it never happened, versus someone who has the hardest time letting go, being so deeply attached to it that they can't release it. And that feeling is palpable too, right? It is, you feel it almost like in your throat. That's what I'm trying to say, right? You feel it, and it is so it's so expressive. It is a deep sensing of something. Now you could logically know that everything is that logically things have happened. Your soul, mind, and yourself will know that there is a loss. It's very practical, but it's still something about the emotional interweaving that unraveling takes its toll on a person. It takes its toll on you psychologically. It takes its toll on you physically. It can take its toll on you in your daily life skills. Listen, there are so many aspects to this thing that I think that people don't really recognize. And in the African American community and in that culture, we have not normalized grief, which is why people struggle with it. Because if truth be told, and I want you all to invite some people here, if you know that there is someone that you are in relationship with that is having this kind of experience in any way, I want you to grab your phone and I want you to tell them to get on this private LYFE Class session. I want you to invite them here. I know that there are more of you that will want to hear this live and in person, and then there are others of you that will go back and watch the video that will be uploaded on YouTube. And either way is fine, but there are some of you, there are many of you that are connected to people right now that need this hearing right now. If you can just grab your phones, share it on your social media platforms, let them know that the line is open. Ask them to get here so that they could hear. We have individuals, the pandemic, listen, and I'm going to get to the slides because I prepared them. They seem to be easy to prepare today. I did those in 30 minutes. I was like, good Lord, there's a lot. And it's still more information to share. But the pandemic in itself, however you think about it, whatever you've determined about it, this pandemic has created a windstorm of loss. And for many people, the loss has been so significant. It's one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, that the brain has not been able to catch up or keep up with the amount of loss. it almost would feel like people are, depending on who they are and how much loss they've experienced, they are moving in an autopilot situation. From one week, there's a loss. A couple of weeks later, there's another loss. And I'm talking about physical loss, so I'm talking about death. Somebody could lose their job, so that's a different variation of loss. We lose relationships, that's a different variation of loss. People being home together has skyrocketed the idea of relationships dwindling because they couldn't handle that capacity of togetherness, and so that's a loss. Kids not being able to go to school or go socialize with their friends, that was a loss. And what we're thinking is that people are moving through that or recovering from it, but the recovery is slow. So it would seem that the energy that's in the earth right now is very, very lulling, low, just trying to, and so you hear people saying, we need to get back to normal. We need to get back to normal. But it is hard to get back to normal when we haven't normalized the things that we're now dealing with now. And it has taken this pandemic to really show us some avenues and ways about us that we haven't given attention to. And so in our machine-like nature to function and to move forward, this pandemic has put a blow into humanity. But I think here's the crazy thing about that statement, right? While it's been a blow to humanity, I honestly feel that it has been the thing that has caused us to feel our pulse again. It ain't nothing like something happening to you to make you stop and say what happened. And oftentimes we're not always feeling our pulse. We're moving in motion. And while that looks like it is regular, oftentimes what we think is regular is not always normal or normalizing. And so I just want to give you some information tonight, and I pray, my prayer is that it will help you. That's my prayer, number one. Number two, if you find that you are in some stages that you need additional assistance, I want you to let me help you, whether I help you personally or whether I refer you to someone who can help you in your particular state or in a particular area that you could have hands-on assistance. I want to do that too, because there is clearly a need for clinicians to work with individuals. We don't even have enough of them. We don't have enough people in the earth right now to handle the capacity of mental challenges that have come upon us as a result of the heaviness that has happened in the world. Let me tell you something. Heaviness doesn't last always. There are lifters, and I believe that I am one of them. I believe that there are, in the speck of the darkness, there is light bulbs. You are probably too individuals with specks of light that is creating or helping you to create a narrative about what you've experienced and what you've seen. And after a while, as people wake up, as people become more aware, those lights turn back on again. And so it's going to be interesting to just kind of see where people are, what they're walking through. You might have some experiences that will be triggered by some of this information. I want to know about it because I want to make sure that you are well. I want to help you get through it or refer you to someone that can help you get through it. Ultimately, at the end of this all, I want you to know that you are not alone. So here we go. Let's share these slides and get to some of the pieces here that we are going to share with you tonight. No. Let's see. I want to get out of that, go back to it again. All of these screens, I have all of these screens and it wears me out. There we go. Yeah. So we are talking through understanding grief tonight, and this is our LYFE class. And so you'll be able to refer to it after we have finished today. We will upload it to our YouTube channel so that you can review it and go back over it. Okay, so understanding grief. Grief, let me move this thing. Yeah, it is. Grief can be defined as the emotion generated by an experience of loss and characterized by sorrow, and or distress, and the personal and interpersonal experience of loss. Okay? Grieving after a significant loss, the death of a loved one or other loss, is a normative process. I'll say that again. Grieving after a significant loss, the death of a loved one or other loss, and we know that other could mean any other loss that you have experienced, anything that you've been connected to for a period of time that has become very important to you. That grieving is a normative process. What does that mean? That means that every last one of us in the earth go through a normal process of grieving. It is normal for us to grieve. It is normal for us to grieve. As a matter of fact, you are supposed to have feelings of grief when there is a loss, whether it is a loss that you have chosen or a loss that you have not chosen. Oftentimes we classify loss as just death, or we equate loss as a death experience of something. And all of that is true, but all of those things require or will require a different kind of response, although it is a loss. Grieving will happen in every last one of those experiences, and it may happen in different ways. I think people are oftentimes caught off guard by the reality of you grieving the loss of a job that you've been at for 20 years. You could be retiring, you could be excited about retirement, but you have to understand that your body, your mind, your soul, spirit has been actively, consciously going to a job for 20 years. So when you come to a place where you stop, then your body is going to go through what we call a withdrawal. And you're going to experience that. What is that called? That's grieving. That is grieving the normal process that you've been in for 20 years. The regular, everyday understanding or reality of walking through, getting up in the morning, driving to work, doing your job, getting off at the end of the day, and then coming home or doing whatever it is that you do after that. Grief can happen with so many things, and it is a normal process for you to grieve. I hope that you understand that and you hear me saying that grieving is normal. Grieving is normal. Most people proceed through this process with, now it says most because we have ratios here. Most people proceed through this process with the help of family, friends, community support, or alone without complications. So there is this expectation that as you grieve, whatever that grieving is, dependent on how connected you are to the thing, how deeply you are tied into it or not, it is normal for you to walk through it. Oftentimes, most people won't need therapeutic support because the therapeutic support or therapeutic support through a counselor, because therapeutic support is probably provided to them through their families, their friends, community support. And even sometimes if they are internal or introverted, they might go through something or experience it alone, but they won't have complications. They'll walk through the stages and they will experience a successful process. Now, notice that I'm saying process because even with this process doesn't come to an end, so to speak. And I'll explain that a little bit later as we move through the slides. There's another portion of people, however, a significant minority of people develop complications in this process. They develop complications because they end up getting stuck in the process or in the cycle of the experience of grief. And that's what we would call complicated grief, or grief that is inhibited by the individual's ability to move through the processes fluidly. Okay? When somebody stays stuck in a particular area for a particular amount of time, and that time is not relegated to what I determine or even what others determine, but we register being stuck in a particular amount of time based off of the behaviors that are exhibited by it. And so complicated grief can result in deep levels of depression, a major interruption in daily life skills, a major interruption in how you do self-care and monitor those things that pertain to you, not eating, not sleeping, how you function or are not functioning at work, if you're in school and you don't have the ability to focus. Complicated grief, and it goes on for a extended period of time that will require us to look at some other clinical factors that may be impacting your process moving forward. Okay, so it's not, again, dependent on a time frame, because everybody's process of grieving will be different. We do not want to suggest that somebody needs to move fast or slow in a process. However, complicated grief would suggest that there are some additional behaviors that do not support a healthy grieving. And if you are an individual that finds yourself in that stuck space, and you don't have the ability to maneuver through that stuck space on your own, then I would always suggest that you talk to someone or go to the next level and receive some therapeutic support through a counselor. Because if it is starting to affect you in ways that are creating what we call maladaptive behaviors, then we might be adding some things to your grief that will not benefit you in the long run. So let's see. So no grief is perfect or perfected. Okay, no grief is perfect or perfected, and I just spoke to that. It can be easy to try to determine how you or someone else should grieve. So a lot of times we determine that, people in their personalities can be dramatic. People in their personalities can be melancholy. People in their personalities can be whatever way that they are. And it can be easy for us to judge how someone is supposed to grieve. We look at somebody's behavior and say, okay, they're too much. Yeah, your grief is too much. Are you still grieving? It's been years. I mean, how long are you going to still keep talking about this situation or whatever circumstance? The answer is however long it's necessary for them to. Okay, it can be easy for an individual from the outside looking in to be able to determine how long this process is supposed to take. And if you're a certain type of individual, you might be putting some boundaries and barriers on your own grieving process. You probably feel like, okay, this should be over by now. I should be feeling better. I should have closure. I should have whatever you have set in your mind to be an expectation for your process of grief. But grief is not perfect, nor is it perfected, meaning that it is not cookie cutter, and it is not a process that even clinicians can determine at 100% will be the same for every person. So anything that I'm saying to you now is really just a base or a guideline of suggested ways, or the pattern, a generalized pattern of ways that we expect or that we can model that would suggest to us that people are moving successfully through processes. But even with that model, it still doesn't mean that your process of grief will look like somebody else's process of grief. Okay? So we just don't know. In addition to that particular bullet point, there are many individuals that try to say and do the right things. They try to say the right thing. And oftentimes, because people have nervous energy around grief, loss, or whatever, they often say things that they think would sound correct. But it actually adds a nuisance to an already boiling fire. And people don't mean it, but it's just that they don't know what to say. And so my husband has perfected this thing. And it's so funny to me because I never really even realized how much he has perfected it. And it's not even intentional. He just knows when not to say something. He's like, I don't have anything to say, so I'm not going to say it. I'm just not going to say anything. And the reality is that silence is therapeutic as well. Because sometimes people are walking through their own thought processes as it relates to what has happened. They don't necessarily need your help trying to figure it out. Sometimes they need the silence to be able to help them think and process for themselves. That's one approach. Oftentimes there are other individuals who just kind of want to try to ease your pain, and they try to get into the process with you. And even when they're doing that, it's uncomfortable for them, and they don't always know what to do with that. I remember in particular an experience that I had 20 some years ago. It was with the twin girls. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It's funny to me now. Not that the situation was funny, but it's funny to me now because I realize how hard it is for people to know what to do. So Sabrina, the 20, how old is she now? 25, 26-year-old, somewhere around there. She's a twin, but we ended up losing the twin. And I remember somebody saying to me, well, at least you have one left. And I looked up. I didn't say anything because I think I thought I was in shock because of what I heard them say, right? But it is indeed what I heard them say. And I said, oh, wow, that is the craziest statement, right? But now that I'm looking at it, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, humans just don't always know what to say. There is you will never replace a loss. I don't care if you slide somebody into that spot. Here's the other thing. Listen, you could be married and divorced from a person for 20 years. And as soon as you hear that that person has died, you'll have a reaction. And you'll say to yourself, oh my God, I haven't been with this person for years. I don't even know why I'm having a reaction. But your brain, as soon as it hears about the loss, it recalls all of the memories. And when you're tied into someone, just because you leave them does not mean that the tie is gone. It just gets easier. You learn not to rely on the tie as consistently as you did before. But as soon as something happens to them, your brain finds memories, and immediately you are flooded with emotions and you have a reaction. People don't always like that experience because they think that it means that they still either love the person or they still wanted to be with the person. No, that's not what that means at all. It only means that your brain has gone through its file to recall all of the memories that are associated now with this person that has now deceased. And you are now feeling the flood of emotions that come back with those memories, and also the emotions that come with that loss. It's not unusual. We have to normalize these things so that we're not being threatened by them. Okay? Grief is not only an emotion, but can also be considered a state. So while we register that grief grief is an emotion and it provokes other emotions, sometimes people can be stuck in the state of grief and it can be overwhelming. I would consider that, depending on the severity of the state of grief, almost like a complicated grief. And people can live there for long periods of time, almost to the point where they can be, again, stuck or malnourished in this space, or stunted in their further growth. And it will take, and listen, people that are around the individual for a long period of time, you can tell when somebody is stuck. A clinician may read somebody's life and hear their subjective thoughts and look at the observations about an individual and be concerned about some areas that they're stuck in. But people, friends, individuals who are around you or you're watching, you can tell when people are stuck. But you do have to watch to give people time. Okay. One of the things that I think that people like to do a lot of is that when people are in a particular feeling of grief, we want to do things that make them cheer up. And that's a nice gesture, taking their mind off of the experience, or the mind off of the thoughts is a great gesture, but it doesn't relieve the grief. It just distracts them from it. Grief is something that we have to be okay with walking through and working through. So while it might be okay for you, let me make you smile, let me cheer you up. And it's important to do that. Those things are only distractions. They're deterrents. We do not want to always hide behind things that distract us from a process that is supposed to be normalized, because that can also stunt our growth. And mental growth is an important factor in the overall life of an individual. The reason why mental health is so huge right now, especially in the African American culture, is because we have a stunted growth in that area. The reason why we have a stunted growth in that area is because we have not focused on the reality of that area of our life, mental, emotional spaces. We have not provoked or been a proponent of maturing those areas. And so individuals are left to try to scurry around and figure out how they're supposed to mentally handle things in and around their life. So this great season that God has us in dealing with mental acuity, mental stability, and mental fortitude is so significant, because there are people that are building, and we can no longer have weak mental people building strong organizations. Weak mental people building strong environments or community or grassroots situations. We can no longer have weak mental people building strong churches. We're watching the implosion of things happen around us because people have not given effort or grace or developmental time to the area of our mentality. And it is in the mind that we have some of the greatest stabilization. We can no longer walk in denial as if we just need spirit and we don't need the mind. It's not the truth. He gave us a mind that could access spirit. We talked about that in the last couple of LYFE Class segments, and you can go back and review some of that information. When he breathed into the nostrils of man, man became a living soul, or rather a living mind. We have hyped spirit. We have hyped our bodies or flesh, but we have neglected the area that processes the mind of God and connects with the mind of man. And so we really want to deal with that and provoke a mature, healthy development of the mental self so that we can walk through the processes of any type of emotion that we experience. I'll say this to you as well. Denial is not spiritual. Yep, I will say it again. Denial of your emotions is not spiritual. We denying our emotions makes us handicapped. And it doesn't allow us to fully embrace the purpose that God gave us emotions for. We are not conquered by our emotions. We are not submitted to our emotions. Emotions are a feeling that are released in order to inform us of something that is going on in us or around us. And when we deny emotion, we diminish our ability to understand what is going on in us and what is going on around us. So denial is not spiritual. We need to come to a place where we are better able to embrace how we feel and let the process move through the stages that it needs to process through. Okay, last bullet point here. Your person or personality will be suggestive to the type of grief responses you may experience. Those things are only emotional responses to what you are feeling. So again, as I stated earlier, if you are an individual, first of all, you've got to know yourself. You can't know yourself in the expectation of other people. You just have to know you. Okay? If you know yourself, when you know your person, you know your personality. Be clear about declaring that you are melancholic if that's who you are. Be clear about declaring that you are dramatic if that's who you are. Be clear about declaring that, and don't be ashamed of that. Why? Because it's important for you to be able to gauge when you are out of balance yourself or not. Because grieving can take on a whole bunch of different feelings and forms in a person's body. For instance, I'll use myself as an example. I am not necessarily a crying griever. It's not my nature. That's not my personality. It's not who I am. I've never been that. Okay, it's never been who I have. It's not even my personality. I'm thinking about it, right? It's not my personality. But right now in the midst of, but I've been paying attention to myself, even in the loss of our brother, Dr. Davis. I've been paying attention to myself since I've been back. And I have been excessively tired. Like I'm tired beyond what my travel tired is. And I said to myself, this must be how I am grieving this experience. Because sometimes it feels like there's pain. And then sometimes it feels like it's just like, oh my God, I am just so tired. Now I've had enough rest. I've been taking my vitamins. I took some extra B12, but I'm still tired. And I register that when I feel that tiredness, that I feel this feeling of loss. For me, that's me grieving. But for someone else, it may not be their grieving. Do you know that some people can cry on a dime? That's why we have professional mourners. They can cry on a dime, not have any attachment to the person or the thing, but they are committed to mourning. Listen, the Bible speaks of it. My husband, if he was online, he'll tell you about we had some particular people up north in the Northeast that would just go from funeral to funeral. They were professional mourners. And we probably have some down here that I'm not aware of to this day. But there are individuals that can cry on the drop of a hat and have no connection. And that is mourning for them. That's their process of response. And that's okay. The reason why it's important for you to know your person and your personality is going to help you know how you process things. And then if you do things that are necessarily out of your personality, it'll help you know that you might be in an extreme space and you need some help being talked down off of this ledge or off of this ladder. That's why you've got to know yourself. When you know yourself, you have the ability to inform others when you're not okay. Listen, there's a thing. We have to stop having people discern that we're not okay. If anything is going to take place in this particular phase of the earth and of the world, we have to make more focus on being self-aware, because self-awareness will help me help you better than me trying to figure out what's going on with you. If people would pay more attention to themselves and be more in tune with their body, be more in tune with their metaphysical self, then you can inform others of how to care for you versus them trying to do things with the hope that it would care for you. So that's why your person or your personality, it will be suggestive to the type of grief responses you may experience. And those things are only emotional responses to what you're feeling. I feel sad, and sadness provokes this emotion. I feel loneliness, and loneliness provokes this emotion. I feel disconnected. I feel separated, and separation or anxiety will create this emotion. And it creates it differently for each person, but it's going to be important that you know how you experience that and talk through it and talk about it. Okay? I see your comments there. Somebody's chatting in the chat, so I'm hoping that you all are answering questions. Let me just take a pause there and just make sure that I am seeing. Okay, Bernicia. Okay, I see you. Yep, professional mourners, and you know that they are there in Chester. Whatever you are as it relates to your personality or your person, be okay with it. This is the time where we need to really, really be okay with ourselves and stop being embarrassed about how people are suggesting that we should be. You inform the narrative of your life, and in grief, it is important that you know yourself, because here's the thing: people can experience suicidal ideations and it will hide. Suicidal ideation is suicidal tendencies, thoughts of suicide with the plan, thoughts of suicide with an active plan. Depression happens to every one of us. The entire human race goes through depression. But there are some people that can be depressed one day and they can snap out of it the next day. There are other individuals that will be depressed for 5 days. They'll be depressed around their period time for women and then snap out of it. There will be individuals that will have a short depressive episode for half a day and snap out of it. Then there are other individuals that have depression episodes, a state of depression consistently for 2 weeks or more, and they are locked in this depression, right? And you won't know it because those individuals could be functionally depressed. They have the face that shows you or helps you determine that they look well, but they're not. And then all of a sudden, there's a suicide note somewhere, and somebody has committed suicide, and you say, oh my God, I just saw them and they had a smile on their face. They were laughing and talking when I saw them. They was going to get food, but all the while they were functionally depressed with an active suicide note, an active suicide plan, and every intention to commit suicide. And in a lot of the cases that we're seeing now with individuals who are now like shocked as to what happened, why did this happen? Because we've gotten individuals who have concealed their feelings for whatever reason, trying to impress other individuals, trying to keep it going, trying to look like they're strong. And all of those things, because we have normalized strength looking a certain way in our culture, it has caused many individuals to suffer in silence and to take their own life. Because now they feel like if I'm weak, people won't respect me. They won't appreciate me. I cannot be off. I always have to be on. Listen, that whole idea of it never goes off. Social media is always on. Somebody is always watching me. I had a post recently and I send it out on my texting subscriber base. If you haven't gotten connected to the texting subscriber base, you need to, because I saw this note and it said, you know what, today I'm just not the strong friend, and I'm okay with that. If you need support, find someone else. And every now and again I use that for myself. I just check out and say, nope, not today. I'm going out. Don't call me. I don't want you to call me and sneak in a therapeutic session. That's not me today. It's important for you to be able to defend your mental development and speak up for yourself. That was a side note. I'm just giving it to you. Complicated grief is a debilitating clinical condition. This is where we look at major depressive disorders and those things that cause us not to be functional. It's a debilitating clinical condition that can develop after the death of a loved one. It is important to note that complicated grief can stem from the death of a loved one, but can also occur in grief situations. So remember, we talked about that. Any situation can be anything that you're severing ties with, anything that you're stepping away from over an extended period of time. If you've been connected to something for an extended period of time, you could be feeling this. If you've been committed to a church for 15 years and now you've got to step away, even if the stepping away is good, you may still have feelings of being drawn, of being untangled from the experience. And it is not something that you have to fight or ignore. You have to know what it is so that you can know and allow the process to work itself out. Okay? So, including but not limited to the loss of a job, a geographical move, or a divorce. So, an estimated 10 to 15% of bereaved individuals, 10 to 15% of bereaved individuals develop complicated grief, experiencing symptoms of intense yearning for the lost loved one, intrusive and troubling images or thoughts of the death, feelings of inner emptiness, difficulty accepting the reality of the loss, and difficulty trusting others. So there's a lot of pieces there that we could have experiences with. This is one of those areas where I want you to really pay attention, because when you think about individuals who have been in abusive relationships that go back to their abuser, or that experience grief in that way that they almost feel like I have to be here. Complicated grief is one of the biggest reasons that they experience this. We don't always understand it. We are easy to say, well, if you're being abused, you just need to leave. And why would you go back to that situation? And what happens is we fuss at individuals, right, about their desire to go back. But we don't understand that there is this intensity that happens when someone is grieving a situation. That's why therapy is important, because the therapist, the counselor, is going to use particular interventions in order to help you unravel, because you could logically know that something is good for you, but you still have the feeling of being connected to them. And in those particular scenarios, separation anxiety is very real. If you've locked your life into a person, if you've locked your thoughts into a system or a thing, separation anxiety can be very real. So I wanted to put this information up there is because complicated grief is distinctive from regular grief because it becomes debilitating. Your daily life skills are impacted. You can't focus. You probably can't work. You may not leave the house. You might be in the bed for days to weeks. You don't eat. Clinical conditionings like that set you in a space that you need assistance beyond what is being provided to you from family, friends. You might need psychiatry and medication that will help you normalize your hormones in order to balance that out so that you can have a sensing of relief from the grief so that you can start to return to some normalized practices. Complicated grief can be deep and very severe. Most times, most people won't necessarily have complicated grief, but you can have experiences of having days of feeling like that without it going on for weeks or months at a time. If you are a person that needs help trying to determine that, please reach out. I don't care what state you're in. I will help you find someone to work with you because you're going to need assistance in working through this kind of severe grief. Okay, let's see. Oh, sorry. Yep. So 7 stages of grief. Originally, there were 5 stages. The doctor that facilitated this particular model expanded the grief stages, and I wanted to bring them to you here. Shock and denial. Feelings of shock and denial are unavoidable. Did y'all see that? Being shocked and being in denial is an unavoidable feeling. It's unavoidable in nearly every situation, even if you could foresee it happening. There is something about being prepared for something coming. Let's use death for an example. You can be prepared for death and still be shocked by it. You could still be walking through the denial of the fact that I knew it was coming, but I still can't believe that it's here. Okay? So that's the first stage. Pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, loneliness, and reflection. Then it suggests that there's an upward turn, then there's reconstruction, and then there's acceptance and hope. Now, while you see that these stages kind of flow from a top to a bottom, they flow like in a staircase. Stages of grief do not resolve this same way. Just because you start at shock and denial, you are not going to graduate to pain and guilt. You may not graduate to anger and bargaining. This is not a graduation step, because what we recognize is that that grief is fluid. Okay, so while this may be the framework that is given to clinicians and individuals to work with, you might see this circle and it's saying, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Grief is fluid. Okay, so this may be what you get. You get the stages of grief and it feels like you're following a path. But in reality, this picture on the right side or on your left side of the screen is really what you experience. You will go back and forth in the fluidity of grief emotion. Grief, feelings. You could jump from denial one day and acceptance the next day and go back to bargaining the next day. You could be at bargaining one day and be at anger the next day. You could feel like you're stepping backwards and then moving forward, just based on what your feelings are. If you're having a good day today, you might be feeling like you've accepted the situation and you're moving on. But tomorrow, you could go all the way back to denial, because grief is fluid. Grief moves you back and forth through the cyclical nature of the stages. And I believe that these feelings, these 7 stages that have been developed over the course of time, are probably not the only stages that people go through. And we just haven't discovered that yet. So it takes observation to kind of see what the greater population experiences. So while you might be trying to follow the roadmap, what's really taking place in you is the road that you got. And that can be a whole bunch of different types of feelings. Okay? So grief, again, is not perfect, nor is it perfected. You will transition back and forth through the different stages of grief, in order and out of order. This is what most people ask me, and I think I'm going to stop here. Where are we? 801. Perfect. People ask, does it end? And here's the honest answer. The symptoms lessen in intensity, but the experience is continual. The experience is continual. You will feel less of it. If you want to determine when do I get to the end so I can say, I can breathe out, dust off my shoulders, and just move forward. You know why? Because every time you have a thought of this person, you will have feelings about this person. And the feelings about this person will cause you to now continue to or re-enter a grieving space about this person, because this person is no longer here. So does it end? The symptoms lessen in intensity, but the experience is continual. So instead of expecting it to end, rather understand that it is important to understand your emotional capacity, and at different points manage the emotions without denying the feelings. Okay, I want to say that again. I think that's the last slide. The symptoms lessen in intensity, but the experience is continual. So instead of expecting it to end, rather understand that it is important to understand your emotional capacity and at different points manage the emotions without denying the feelings. Okay? Why that's going to be key is critical. It's critical that you understand it so that you don't walk in this space that says, I must be crazy. I'm out of my mind. Why am I still feeling this? Imagine you are an individual who has lost your mother. Do you realize that for a baby, their mother is the first person that they got to experience their first voice, their heartbeat, their scent, the rumbling of their intestine, everything that your body carried, everything that a baby experienced first was in the womb or in the body cavity of a mother. So they come out with first impression. This person is my caregiver. That's why even when children are abused by their mothers, they still have an affinity for their mother. We often wonder, we're like, okay, why would you still want to go and be with them? Because you don't understand that the tie is so deep for a child in that connection, right? So imagine growing up with your mother, and now your mother, if the stages of life are accurate, your parents will go before you. And it will be very difficult for a child, even an adult child, to be able to reconstruct their life, because all of their life they've had their parent. They don't know life without a parent in it. And it can be difficult to reconstruct. It can be difficult even if you are dealing with the loss of a job. Somebody, you've been working at a job for 40 years and now you're laid off, and you wonder why people are at the job site just in tears, overcome with emotion, because for 40 years they've been in this space, in this state that has been continual. It has become a part of their natural rhythm that they now work in. Grief is a sensitive space. Again, it is specific to every person. I challenge those of you who have never experienced grief. If you've never experienced it, I want to encourage you to to open yourself up to have a different kind of sensitivity regarding it, regarding other people. And those of you who have experienced it, you don't have to compare your grief to someone else's, because your grief will not be anybody else's. How you handle and process grief will be specifically up to you. There is a healthy way for you to handle grief, and your healthy way will be different from another person's healthy way. As long as you're healthy, that should be the goal. Okay? Don't categorize grief as if to say, I should be grieving more than you because my loss was more significant than yours. You could never categorize grief. You could never categorize your grief against someone else's grief. It is horrible to compare one person's grief to your grief. Well, they should be grieving like this because they lost this. Sometimes they're grieving like that because there's some other factors related to it that just cause more pain. And as a result, their grief is seemingly more expressive. There are some stuck places in that process that may not have gotten resolved. And so when somebody feels that something is unfinished, then their grieving could be not just about the person, but about the time that they no longer have to work something out or to settle some things within themselves. Grieving is not specific to any person. And so for those individuals observing somebody grieving, be very sensitive. You don't have to worry about enabling or disenabling someone. That's not your role. If you feel like there is something based off of the information that I gave you tonight that has got somebody stuck to a point where it is debilitating, and that debilitation is showing up in severe depressions, behaviors that are out of the norm for that person, their daily life skills are being impacted, they can't seem to focus, they're not going to work as they normally should in order to take care of themselves, they can't come to grips on a more consistent basis with things and with life, then try to intervene. Get them connected to someone that could help if possible. Because oftentimes the first line of defense is not going to be the clinicians, it's not going to be the doctors, it's going to be the people that live amongst the people. And so it is our job not to just counsel with people, but it is hopefully, I think it's a part of my job, is to help educate individuals with things that they can keep an eye out for with their own family members and friends. Because people won't get to me. Oftentimes they'll get to me last. The people that see them every day are the people that have been paying attention to them up front. They've been paying attention to them first. So be clear. Be aware of yourself so that you can inform individuals of what's going on with you. Don't be ashamed. My men in particular, because oftentimes I know that we have ascribed men to having a particular type of strength. Men don't cry, it's not true. Men don't break, that's not true. We have not normalized people being able to feel. And it has cost us men having heart attacks, men having strokes, men losing their mind. Our men, we have not allowed a space for them to be able to healthily walk through some spaces. And we want to change that narrative. Okay? I'm done with this tonight, but I do want to answer any questions. I know that there are some people that joined and couldn't stay on, and that's fine. We will upload this as a quick check-in for individuals who wanted to listen to it, and I might even put this on, I might put the link on some social media spaces so that people can even see it. So instead of them coming to the YouTube channel, they can just see it. They can click the link and see it there. I think it's that important. But I want to address those of you that are on tonight to make sure that we answer any questions that you may have, if you have them. If you don't feel comfortable asking these questions on the chat, you can send a message to me through the business line at 786-972-1995. You can also send an email to me at info@shazettaMorris.com. I would love to answer any questions. If you feel like you need, or someone that you know needs a referral, please send me a message. Email me at info@shazettamorris.com, and I would be more than happy to help you get connected to someone. If you're not in state here, connected to someone in the state that you live in, because we don't want you to suffer alone or suffer in your own silence when you may need some help. And it can be easy as talk therapy, as one form of intervention, or some other things that will help you move through some places. Counseling now, therapeutic interventions have just expanded themselves in so many different ways, including for those who are traumatized by a death or a loss, something that they're talking about now, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The acronym is EMDR. As a matter of fact, Iyanla Vanzant wrote a book about it. Oh God, yeah, I have it. I think I do. She wrote a book about it where she talks about the process of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Where is it? Lord, let me find it real quick because I want to be able to give it It's in my books. Ooh, Iyanla, where is that? Hold on. I'm going to find it because I want y'all to have it. Iyanla Van Zant books. Yep. Hold on, I'm almost there. And while I'm doing this, you tell me if you have any questions. Get Over It. That's the name of the book, and I actually have it. I downloaded it to my iPad, and it's interestingly enough, I've been reading this book over the course of 3 to 4 years because with being in school, I don't have a lot of extra time to read. But when I do, I'll sit down for 30 minutes and I'll grab some material. And I have a lot of things in my iPad that I'm still catching up on. But the name of the book is Get Over It. And what I love about the book is that she starts to explain this eye movement desensitization and processing and reprocessing therapeutic intervention. And I thought it was so cool because I think she was trying to practically give a model to individuals who were dealing with trauma. Trauma is one of the areas that they use EMDR in most significantly. So people can be dealing with the traumatic loss. And in their grieving process, they are stuck and they can't get through. I mean, they just cannot see themselves beyond a particular state and they're stuck. So at first we try to deal with what is keeping them stuck around whatever the loss is. And then dependent on the type of traumatic experience that is imprinted on their soul, EMDR is one of those interventions that helps individuals reprocess how they associate their feelings with the emotion, or their feelings with the thought of the trauma itself. That's it. So EMDR takes a person through that whole experience. And after a while, I think they're at a minimum, it's like 8 sessions. You start to have a different emotional response when you think about a particular thing. And originally it may be causing you to have anxiety or, high levels of anxiety. But as the EMDR, the intervention starts to work, it will reprogram how your mind thinks about that thing, and you'll have a different emotional response to it. So if you have a minute, if you're interested in some reading material, particularly that, you can definitely grab the book. Again, the name of the book is Get Over It, and it's a book by Iyanla Van Zant. You might enjoy just reading some of the experiences and watching the EMDR process at a minimal level at work as she's using it in the book. B, I'm reading your statement. In general, I process grief very different. I can attest to that, right? I think with my mom, I absolutely loved her, but her dying felt like a closing of a chapter, which probably sounds crazy to say about your mother. No, actually, that sounds amazing to me because I know you. Now, somebody else might say, okay, I don't understand that. So it would be important for you to explain your narrative as it relates to why you say that. But I can completely understand why it would feel like a closing of a chapter. And I'm grateful that that's your experience because you needed that. So it's a powerful interpretation and it's a powerful processing. For someone else, it may feel different, and it will be a different experience based on the relation, the personality, the experience of life with that individual. All of those things are this is why it's so important that we do not judge other people's grief. However a person grieves, we don't have to judge it. We don't have to judge if they're still grieving, because it is what we've called a normative or normal process. We all go through it. You can try to avoid it all day long, but all of us are going through it. Even in the smallest measures, you probably grieved going from kindergarten to first grade. And that sounds simple, right? But it's the truth. Layla, our daughter, Brian will tell you, it was so funny because when that child was getting ready to turn 5, I mean, she stormed through the house. She did not want to turn 5 years old. Does anybody remember that? If he's listening, he'll tell you that was the funniest. But it was a whole year. She would cry. I mean, it was just terrible. And we couldn't understand what was going on. She was grieving leaving 4. We didn't understand it, but that was her experience. And we had to embrace it as this is her normal process of saying goodbye to this age and all that it meant for her and coming into another phase. I notice now that child, she still has these extreme expressions of grieving different things. And that's just how she does things. And so I don't want to make her feel embarrassed. I don't want to make her feel like it's wrong. We normalize it. We normalize it because that process is going to happen to her several times over in many different phases and in different ways. And it's important that we embrace that process. And it's good that as children, there are some things that we don't expect. We don't expect children to lose their parents. It's not an expectation, but it does happen. And so that's not necessarily normal, but it has now become normal to someone. But children, they probably experience grieving other things, whether it's a loss of a parent, a loss of a friend, a loss of a grade, moving from the step up thing that they talk about, the step up in a grade or whatever, graduation, whatever. When somebody goes up, that means that they're releasing something that was under them or that they've accomplished. And that it's exciting for everybody looking, but sometimes it's a grieving process for the person that's in it. We just haven't paid attention to these things. We haven't paid attention to these things. And so now, if you think back, you too may have experienced some things that you have just kind of grieved over and just moved over so quickly that you're like, okay, that's not significant. But those are developmental milestones that help you handle grief at larger capacities. You pay attention to it. Think about your own life and you pay attention to it. And again, reach out if you need to talk about it some more. I am here with you. If you need some referrals or you need some questions answered or anything of that nature, I definitely want to serve your purpose in that. I do hope that this teaching has been beneficial to you. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I am excited about being able to provide services to individuals. And so if you are an individual that needs those services, please reach out. This will serve as a combination of our LYFE Class and mental wealth webinar for this month. It's not necessarily as jovial as most people would like. This is not always the high energy, high impact experience, because while we are moving in positive affirmations, there's another side to this thing that we have to walk through and manage as well. And we have to walk through that process, provoke maturity in that process, provoke development in that process. Because as long as we are living, there will be something that we will be grieving a loss of. I don't want to have you ignorant of the reality of life. So if it's life, we need to know how to handle life. I'm signing off. I'm going to stop here. We'll be on for a few minutes if you have any questions. I'm so appreciative for your attention tonight. Again, I hope that it has benefited you. At the end of this week, Saturday, if you have nothing that you have scheduled to do, please join us with Let's Heal One-on-One. Malika Crocker Jackson is facilitating this mental health awareness in her community, and we are going to be right in it with her to support that effort. So join us down here in Homestead / Florida City area if you are in the area. We want to We would love to see your face and have your participation in that.